Welcome to Here Where You Belong, your go-to podcast for exploring belonging, with your host and belonging expert, Dia Irby. We are thrilled to have you join us. Together, we'll dive into the depths of what it means for each of us to find our own place in the world, whether it's within our communities, our relationships, or within ourselves. Today's episode is meant to inspire, uplift, and remind you that no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. So, grab a cozy spot and settle in. Welcome to Here Where You Belong.
Hello, awesome belongers. Welcome home to Here Where You Belong podcast. Today, I'm proud to introduce someone whose message speaks so clearly that we knew they were meant to be part of our community, so we invited them to share their stories. I'm Dia, your host, and our guest today is a storyteller extraordinaire. Get ready to be inspired and blessed. Let's welcome Wendy Folsom.
Hello, how are you, Dia, and audience members?
I'm so glad you're here, Wendy.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation.
So, here's a little bit more about our guest today. Wendy has been a storyteller and teaching artist for over 20 years. She has a bachelor's degree in theater performance, playwriting, and a master's in communications and storytelling. Wendy's youth plays have won national awards, and she was awarded 2 fellowships at the Kennedy Center for her dramaturgical work. That's an interesting word.
Not one that many people know. You did a great job.
She's a senior producer at BYUradio and works as a podcast producer for BYUradio, producing the Appleseed podcast, which is about storytelling, Kaboom, original audio dramas, and the soon to be released, by now it already has been released, Wink, Stories for Better Bedtimes. Ooh, parents need that. Wendy's work has centered on using theater and storytelling to strengthen family relations and to improve student experience and education. We need that. She is on the teaching artist roster for her state's Arts Council, has taught storytelling on a university level, and has created curricula or programming for middle school classrooms, libraries, children's theaters, and university programs. What a prolific producer. Her story-based work focuses on play, creativity, and connection for children and families. She believes stories are the perfect framework to figure out who we are, what we care about, and how to become our best selves. The better we understand story, the better we can live the story of our lives. I said she was a story extraordinaire, storyteller. Well, did I cover everything?
That and more. Thank you.
Well, I am really glad to have you here. And as you know, this podcast is about belonging. And I invite my guests to tell whichever, if you have a plethora of stories or multiple stories, which story can you share with us, or multiple stories today about belonging and its part in your life?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much that you're doing this podcast, because I really believe that belonging is one of the key words and concepts of our lives, of our existence. And I think a lot about it. I try to program around it. I just think that it's so important. And there's so many stories, but it's just really interesting. The story that has popped up for me to share with you today is very personal and maybe a little unusual. I have, in the last year or two, been having declining health. And I just have had like weird neurological symptoms, some tremoring, some weakness in a hand, and a lot of pain in walking. And I've been trying to find answers. Well, about 2 weeks ago, so this is a very fresh story, but it has a lot to do about belonging for me. About 2 weeks ago, I actually got a diagnosis, which I was surprised and thrilled to actually have an answer. but the answer was somewhat perplexing. It was functional neurological um, disorder. It's long words. I'm like, what is that? It's actually the second most diagnosed neurological diagnosis, but a lot of people don't know about it. And what it means, this is the weird part, is that you have symptoms, very real neurological symptoms, but you don't have any neurological damage. So there's not been a stroke. I don't have Parkinson's, thank goodness. So what that means is my hardware is all good, my software is glitching a little. And this is the part that brings in belonging. They don't really know what causes this, but there's been a very strong link to trauma. And I went, oh, wow. Like, what do I do with that? And so I've started, I've got my team of people around me, but I'm supposed to do trauma-based therapy. I'm supposed to do neurologically based occupational therapy and physical therapy. So I go to those three things every week, and I'm just starting. But now I'm supposed to parse out where my trauma is and why it's there. And I'm just starting, so I've got a lot to figure out. I have trauma. Everybody has trauma. I feel like everybody has trauma. I don't think my trauma is greater or lesser than anybody else's. But what I'm starting to realize as I'm starting to parse things out is it might be less about what the trauma is and more about how I process trauma. And that takes me to my family of origin. This takes me to my mother. And it's been already such a fascinating and rich journey, even for me. It's almost like the doctor gave me a permission slip to like go take some time and deal with these things in your life. And so in that way, it's sort of been a blessing. We'll see. We'll see if I continue to think it's a blessing as I move along. But I'm just like, where do I belong? Like, I belong in my family for good and for bad. I belong here. I'm already in just a few weeks that I've been dealing with this, seeing that I'm so much more like my mother than I thought I was. And I love my mother. My mother is practical, and my father died when I was 8. So, we had some early trauma that way, but I never felt unsafe because my mom always seemed in control. But that being said, I never saw her cry. I never saw her struggle. And so I was raised with this kind of unspoken, but very firmly kind of pointed out through little comments and through just her example that I'm to take care of everybody. I am to not fall apart. All of these things, which I think a lot of your listeners probably relate to. Some of it's a generational thing for sure, for especially older women. Maybe baby boomers and earlier. I'm like right on the edge in the beginning of Gen X, and so this is the water we swam in, that we were raised in, was this, and it's like this is a really interesting journey for me because it is about belonging. I do belong to my mom. I do belong to my family, and I have to embrace all of it. I have to embrace the good and the bad, or the things that I don't agree with that were passed down, and I need to learn how to do some things differently. But this journey not only has opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I still think I've got a lot to learn, but my love for my mom has so increased during this journey because I know these things were passed down to her as well. And I'm like, I'm really just thinking about her. And by the way, she died in 2018 of ALS. So she's no longer with me, and I can't share this journey with her. And I'm not sure she would want me to share this journey with her because she didn't like to talk about uncomfortable things. That would be bringing down that.
So we don't have to worry about her watching this podcast.
No, we don't. So it's like really thinking about what are the pieces I got from mom? What are the pieces that I want to shed? What are the things I want to hold on to? Really makes me think about how I belong to my mom and how grateful and thankful I feel that I do get to belong to her. And she was a remarkable person. But that's my very recent belonging journey that I'm in the midst of right now. So I don't have an ending for you, but I have what is sort of a grand beginning, I think. A little scary, but also I think this is really a lovely journey.
I love it. I love the impact that it's having on you loving your mother more. Too many people might go back and face things and then grow to resent. But we the whole concept of belonging has to start with us belonging with ourselves
Yes, absolutely.
and accepting who we are. And we didn't become us in a vacuum. So that's, yeah, the person that focuses most on, I'm not going to be like my parents when I grow up, actually, because they're focusing on what not to be, that's what they become.
Yeah. I'm like, it's kind of a losing battle. You're gonna become like them, and then it's up to you to figure out what to do from there. But I just think it's a losing battle to think you're not going to be your parents. We are.
Right. Well, that is how you were introduced to the world. The that is the norm that was set, and it takes a lot more work to undo that norm that was set.
It does. Yeah, and I just firmly believe as I've done I'm a writer, so I've done a lot of writing through some of my more traumatic periods in my life. And there was a period of time when I was looking for my lost children. I heard it on a podcast somewhere and I thought, now, isn't that interesting? And I want to find kind of these broken parts of myself, my lost children. So I literally would just like do a visualization, like a meditation, and I would ask, but I'm a very visual person, so I'd say I want to meet my lost children. And I would just let my thoughts go and would try not to control them. And I ran into people, I would just meet little people like this little chaotic girl that was like this chaos verse of myself, because at that point in my life, I was worried that I was creating the chaos in my life and it wasn't the other people around me that I thought were so doing it. And I had to, I wasn't creating a lot of the major chaos in my life, I'll just say. However, I had to own up to the point that I do bring some chaos into my life. But as I would always try to hug this little lost child, and I was always gifted with some sort of knowledge of how this person blessed me. And I think it's the same with our parents. Like we may have gotten things from them that we don't want, but we also there's good there too. And for me, the chaos, this chaotic little girl with wild hair is how I saw her. I loved her so dearly. And as I hugged her, I realized that she's my fierceness. Like she's what's helped me survive. And so I need her. I need my mom. I need these people that I belong with, even if it's not always perfect. I need them. And I just think that the more we're willing, instead of running away and don't want to look at it, and I'm not going to be like that, I think that the more we actually embrace, then we can understand and see more clearly those pieces that we should incorporate and those pieces that we need to shed.
Tell me more about, or explain more about looking for the lost children.
This was such a fascinating period in my life where I would just do this. I would just get in a quiet place and I would just say, I want to meet one of my lost children.
Is that an imaginary?
Well, it's just in my thoughts in my head. And for me,
Okay,
it's like a
okay.
spiritual journey. I think it's partially a spiritual journey, and I think it's partially a creative journey where I'm just imagining, but I'm giving some quiet space for me to contemplate the parts of myself that I think are broken, or that need some help, and eventually finding that they need a little love and attention too. One of my other ones, I called her Ophelia. I just saw this girl. I was like looking down through the water, and here's this girl kind of sort of reaching out to me as she's sinking, and she's saying, "I'm fine. I'm fine." And I realized just this week in my therapy session that that is tied so much to my mom. I never even thought about that. That's not just me, that's my mom. And I learned that from her, and I still do it. I'm absolutely trying to stop those words from coming out of my mouth anymore. I might say, okay, I'm okay, but I'm trying not to say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm
I'm
fine.
fine.
Because
Well,
it's,
your mom had to do that. If you were only 8, did you have siblings?
yes, yeah, there were four of us. I was right in the middle. Yeah.
And so, I mean, she had to be fine. She had to be strong. She had to be both parents for the family.
Yeah,
And,
and that's
and
what I've done too. And so that's like I said, that's you see those strengths that come from that too. But we push those things too far, and then
Mhm.
you find that you're 60 years old and your body's shutting down because I've said I'm fine too many times.
Ooh.
Isn't that interesting?
That is a very interesting exercise and challenging. I encourage all the belongers listening to go find you a quiet place and just ask for the lost children to reveal themselves to you. And a lot of that is so healing to accept. Just like I say that your best friend. Treat yourself like you are your best friend.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the only best friend you're going to have for every second of your life.
That's very true.
That best friend is going to be with you till that very last second. So how you wouldn't condemn the crazy wild-haired child. You would embrace that child and encourage that child. You wouldn't tell Ophelia, sinking Ophelia, you're fine. Yeah, okay, you're fine. No, you're not fine. And
Down
it's
and pull her
okay to
up.
not be fine. And let me pull you up.
Yeah.
So find your lost children and treat them like you would your best friend, because you are your best friend and you
Yeah.
belong to you. I
Well,
love
and it is interesting that we usually treat ourselves the worst, out of the bunch.
right.
And that's just something that is a woman's journey, and maybe a man's journey too, but it's definitely essential to probably just about every woman's journey. And yeah, and these children, the general idea is not to find them and vilify them like you're a broken part of me and I'm mad at you. It's to find compassion and understanding and to embrace them. And what I would do after just sitting and feeling like, I just whatever, whether it took a couple minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, then I would journal about it. And I'm not an artist at all, but I would kind of sketch how I saw them. And I treasure those journal, that section of my journal. I just think, and this is probably something I'm going to pick back up now with this new journey, because I'm in a different place now. I'm older, I'm facing some other things, and I've got more layers of things to learn. So I'm starting to make sure I'm journaling. I mean, I just had a kind of a crazy dream 2 nights ago, and I'm going home and putting it in my journal for sure. Because it was a message. I don't feel that way about very many of my dreams, but sometimes you have a startling image or a strong emotion, and it's your subconscious bubbling up, trying to say, hello, hello, I have something to tell you.
Over here, over here, over
Yes.
here.
You're
Right.
ignoring me, but I'm going to keep knocking until you pay attention.
Mom,
Yeah.
mom,
Yeah.
mom.
The lost children.
Inner child, mom.
Yes.
This is all so amazing, and what a novel, interesting approach to belonging to ourselves by finding our lost children. And I love that. But we're going to take a break right now and be back soon with Wendy. Hey there! Isn't my guest amazing? So glad you joined us today. In this world that often feels disconnected, building community and fostering belonging are essential. That's why I created this podcast, to bring inspiring people to you, to encourage you to create that sense of belonging and community, no matter where you are. If you're being blessed by my guest, and we have some more, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. You know who needs to hear this. Stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember, you belong. Now, back to our amazing guest. And we are back with storyteller extraordinaire Wendy Folsom, and we have been having a great conversation. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know on the second half, I have my 3 favorite questions I ask. And the first one is, what do you consider is your greatest accomplishment? Now, you have multiple accomplishments because I read them all at the beginning of this podcast. But what do you consider is your greatest accomplishment?
Well, yeah, I had to think about it for just a minute when you sent that to me, but it really came clear to me quite quickly that it was my relationship with my children. And part of that is just because I value and love them so much. And I have always I chose to mostly be a stay-at-home mom. I really chose to kind of put all my eggs in that basket. I felt like that was, again, patterned by my mom, that was my reason for being here. And I am a creative person, and I found motherhood to be a very creative pursuit. So we had so much fun. But
How many children do you have?
so I have 4. I have, a daughter, oldest daughter, and then I have a son who's high functioning autistic, and these kids are all adults now in their 30s and 20s. And then I have born two daughters, but now a non-binary and trans son. So that's all been quite a journey,
Wow.
And so my greatest accomplishment, because and continues to be so hard won. I can greatly appreciate and remember that raising kids was challenging. But for me and my experience, I think continuing to, I can't say raise because they're no longer my home really, but to continue to nurture that relationship with adult children has been really challenging. And certainly they've most of them gone off on paths that I wasn't even aware of, or certainly didn't plan or think about. And I've had, and then dealing with some of the stuff with my mom and feeling like I'm starting to understand some of the disconnect that I've had with her. I thought with my own children that I was very like more connected than my mother. So I'm like, I'm doing great.
Look at me.
Well,
I
yeah.
got this.
Or if not great, I'm doing pretty good. And yeah, that's not necessarily the opinion of everybody involved. And so we've really had to work through some difficult conversations, difficult, and on many levels, spiritually, intellectually, relationally, for sure. And to come to realize that they didn't always feel as much connection as their little spirits were hoping for. And I've had to, again, and a lot of this is still just coming, another wave of this work is just coming right now with my health, is that I'm having to really understand that just because I was more connected than my mom doesn't mean I was connected enough. And so I have to own up to the ways that I've hurt my kids. And we had, my first marriage was very challenging. And so we had a lot of issues and things going on. So that's been hard, but I have to say at the end of this little story that no one has taught me more about love than my children. When they've wanted to talk about some of these things and some lack of attachment or whatever it was, they have come to me in such a spirit of love. It's not like we're looking to blame you or we want an apology. I have found they've wanted two things essentially. They wanted to be listened to. They wanted their story to be known. So I hope I learned fairly early on to not defend, not to even talk back, just to listen. And then they want to understand. And so a lot of their questions end up being to me about my childhood because they just want to understand what I came from. And that helps them understand the patterns now that they're enmeshed in. So I'm trying to understand these patterns. My mom didn't want to talk about it, but I'm trying to understand. And my kids are talkers and they want to talk about and understand. And some of that stuff's been like a knife in my heart. It's been so painful because the one thing I wanted to be the very best at, I wasn't, and that's why I say that's my greatest achievement, because we're all, I don't think any of us can just take for granted that our best loved ones are going to always be in relationship with us. It's a gift and it's something that we work on. And even if we work on it, it's still sometimes not given to some people. There's so much estrangement and stuff. So this is so precious to me and worth the fight, to show up.
Well, yes. And, especially if we're intentional, we want to do the best that we can, but we're going to mess up because
Absolutely.
coming from where we came from.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
I just wish I would have known when I got started that that's just part of it, right? That you're going to mess up royally and that you just do your best and you stay humble about it. But I really, honestly, I had so much enthusiasm. I just thought it's going to be so great. I think I just wore these rose-colored glasses until they were literally just smashed to smithereens,
Oh, well, but at least you cared.
I did.
There are parents that don't take the responsibility to heart. And that is, but you know what? It doesn't matter if you're the perfect one or the worst one. It's where they are in the family. That's who they're becoming. And everybody can get a counselor and take meds,
I do think that most people care and they're trying to show up in the best way that they know how. And a lot of us just don't know how and we're learning. And that's just every parent's plight, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's all part of it. You just hope that it's an improvement over what you've inherited from your generation.
Yeah, I used to say that a lot. Pass down better than you got,
But I like that. Pass. Okay, second question.
Okay.
What makes you feel like you belong?
Yes, I'm a storyteller and I see the world in stories. I feel like everyone's living a story. And you know what? I just feel honestly like I belong if people know my story. And we have so much disconnect in our community, our world now with just everything that's happened and social media and the pandemic and all of those things. And I think that people are really hungry and trying to reach out again, and I think that's great. But we're also busy and we kind of live a more disconnected life than we used to. And
Mhm.
knowing each other's stories is so central. You don't even have to love or admire me or anything, but if you've taken the time to get to know my story, which I also believe if you truly do know each other's stories, you love those people. If you have a basic understanding of what they've been through, you grow in understanding and love. I don't think you cannot love people if you really know their story. But
That would you agree that part of that is when you're telling your story, you're being authentic and vulnerable,
yes, absolutely.
and that connects people to the vulnerability and the authenticity.
Absolutely. Yes. And storytelling is powerful. There's been research done that when between a storyteller and a story listener, this is kind of the sciencey side of belonging, I guess. But and this is pretty recent research, and they've mapped it on fMRIs and EEGs, that the brain waves, the brain temperatures, the whatever the parts of the brains that they're measuring start to sync up. And they call it brain coupling or neural synchronicity. It's like a dance. They start just syncing up together. And in fact, I have a really great little story about that. I had 3 of my 4 adult kids at my house last weekend, and I just said, "Hey, guys, I'm going on some podcasts talking about, the power of storytelling and whatever." I said, "What stories do you remember when you were kids that had a big impact on you?" And I loved this little story because I feel like it so shows that brain coupling. So we were at the farm where my dad grew up for a family reunion. And earlier in that day, my third child had convinced their dad to buy him a, pocket knife at a, a a flea market or something. And you can tell where this is going. So my husband and I decided we were just going to go down the road and take some flowers to my dad's grave. And then we were going to be back soon. Well, while we were gone, they cut the wrong way and got pretty good little chunk of their thumb cut into. And they were left with cousins and probably one or two of my sisters. And so she had been wrapped up, but it needed stitches, and they were waiting for us to get back. So here she is waiting. She's probably 8 or 9. She's not distraught, but really like mom and dad aren't here, and I know that they're coming, but and an older relative, she remembers as Clive. I can't place a Clive, but there was an older relative there that either had a different last name or is somebody that I don't know, sat down next to her. And here she is, pretty emotional. And he's an older man, and he starts telling her the stories of his scars on his fingers. And she's looking at him going, like, he doesn't look that upset, about that. And just kind of somewhat distracted by the stories. But where he was in his story, the calm retelling of memories past, which are now endearing and, you know, starts regulating her, and she starts syncing up, and she's calmed, and she feels calmer about, like, she still knows, like, intellectually in her frontal cortex she knew that we were coming soon and we were going to take her to the nearby medical center to have it looked at. But now she emotionally also felt that and knew that everything was okay. And it was just a kind gentleman that was trying to calm down a child that was upset. And that's such a beautiful example of this brain coupling. And so to me, that's belonging. That's like the science view snapshot, maybe of belonging.
Mhm.
Stories aren't just nice, friendly thing to share. They're very powerful. And they're also shooting off all sorts of like different centers. Like you get dopamine, you get all these things, that are feel good. That also and they build a sense of empathy. Stories will trigger things that actually build empathy. So I just think stories are some of the best things that we can share when we're trying to build a sense of belonging.
I I agree and totally. And what a cool opportunity to actually see that happen. And I'm sure as your child related the story, that was one of her favorite memories, that you could see the effect even in her telling.
Absolutely. Yes. It
That's
was
cool.
it was just a fun weekend last weekend because we ended up starting to share a bunch of stories just like those,
Yeah, storytelling around the remember when. It's always interesting to me that the kids will tell a story and I'll go, I don't even remember that happening. And it was very major, impactful to them. Like,
Yes. And even if it's a story you do remember, you'll remember it differently because that's the way memory works. Memory is a meaning-making device. It's not necessarily like a logging down details. Over time, this is all based on studies, but over time, they've interviewed people that happened right after like a traumatic event, and then like 6 months later, and then 5 years later, and whatever. And they find that the people their memories change because their mind's always working on it and creating memory. So memory is there to help us, but not necessarily to document our lives and the facts of our lives. And the other super interesting fact about this is, because I've been also rereading The Body Keeps the Score because of my diagnosis, they
sure.
say that the ones that the memories don't change, that they have PTSD. They're stuck in the memory back here and they haven't made meaning out of it. Isn't
They
that
haven't been
fascinating?
able to grow from it. That is,
Yeah, it's just so fascinating. So
oh,
we need it. Don't argue with your, relative because they remember something differently. You both have remembered it differently, and you've created your own meaning out of what had happened. It's so fascinating because we like, no, but I know what happened.
I
So,
know I had. That's good advice too. Okay, so good. Now, my last thing I ask is because I learned so much from people when they tell me what their favorite quote is.
yeah.
And you said, when life itself seems lunatic, who knows where madness lies? Perhaps to be too practical is madness. To surrender dreams, this may be madness. Too much sanity may be madness. And madness of all, to see life as it is and not as it should be. Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra.
Cervantes. That's the author of Don Quixote. And I think it's a quote from, it might be in the like narrative part, or it might be a Don Quixote quote. I can't remember. I love that story so much. I love that quote. And honestly, I'd have to say, I mean, like my heart lives in all of that. Like I've always just been a dreamer. I mean, how did I get to be a storyteller and you know, and a children's playwright? I mean, those are not practical paths. And for me to then come around full circle at the end of my career, and the three main things I do in my work with Kaboom, Wink, and the Appleseed is storytelling. Now, I'm not doing the storytelling, but we're bringing in the very best tellers in the world, in my opinion, people that I've known for many years. And then I'm at Kaboom, I'm writing scripts for children because those are original audio dramas. And we also have a student team of writers. So I'm coaching their writing, which happens to be my third love. And that feeds into the dramaturgy of the Kennedy Center stuff. That's very much kind of story research and story structure and all those kinds of things. And so that's very practical, but yet somehow I followed those dreams and I've ended up here. But I also would have to say that as I've gotten older and have had some traumatic periods in my life, that I've gotten more to the practical end of the spectrum. And I wonder right now if I would be in this diagnosis that I am right now, if I had tended more my madness instead. So I'm kind of trying to work my way back there. I want to re-embrace. It's always been there, but it's like where the proof's in the pudding. Like where have I really spent my time? Where have I really, and working full time really drains it out of you. So there's only so much you can do, but these are choices we make every day. Are we following our dreams, or are we just showing up to be practical? And I just love the final part of that. And maddest of all is to see the world as it is and not as it should be. That just gets me right in the heart because I'm like, that's what all of our work should be about. Like, who could we be? Where, I want to help create that place I belong. Not just look around and cast my eyes about and see where I am right now and where I might belong, but where could I belong? What great, amazing community could we build that it has a sense of belonging for everyone. I just think that is so deeply important.
It is. Um, and I create the place of belonging for yourself as you're doing working through your process, but also for other people.
Yeah.
And
And that's messy work, gotta tell you. It's messy work because we're all different and everything. But man, the closer I get to it, it's so enriching. It's so like it's just that's where I want to be, you know. But I got a lot to learn. I'm working on it.
well, a day we learn something is a good day, and the day we stop learning is like, are we dead?
Might as well be.
Oh, yeah. Before we close, do you have any parting words or final things you'd like to say to our belongers?
Well, I would love to be able to just say, invite you to come into the podcast that we make. They're all storytelling based. They're all meant to strengthen families. They're fun. The Appleseed are these tellers that we bring in from all over the world. We fly them in, we put them in a small studio with a live audience, and we both film and record them. And then the other thing that's been really fun is because I've been a teaching artist for so many years, I love building curriculum. So we've been creating lesson plans around some of the favorite stories and a whole catalog where you can look up like, oh, I need a 10-minute story, or I need a story about, I don't know, something, make a friendship. And you can go to the story catalog and it's a searchable database for all of our stories. And I think we've got hundreds, but it's just so much fun. And you can just Google the Appleseed podcast or slash storytelling, because there's probably a lot of podcasts with that name. And then Kaboom is like an audio adventure for your ears. It's just so much fun. There's actors, sound effects, and they're all just, again, fun, fantastical stories, but also they have some sort of meaningful exploration of theme, with the kids in the story. And then dear to my heart is Wink, and it's just coming out right now. This, a lot of my kids grew up with some form of anxiety, some of them OCD, and some depression. And I just really wasn't that clued into that. I didn't recognize it. I didn't really see it with my older kids, especially. And this is the podcast I wish I would have had when they were young, because they had a hard time going to sleep and I had no idea that they were anxious. And this podcast has a nice, engaging story, but then it just has this mindfulness thing that takes the elements of the story and just, has the kids moving through stretches and breathing and all these and beautiful affirmations. Everything is, again, meaningful. Like the very first story is about a caterpillar who wants to be a butterfly, and she doesn't know she's going to be a butterfly someday, and she's so sad. And a little wise beetle tells her, your only job right now is just be the best you that you can be, And so she's like, do you mean going and munching and crunching the green leaves? And he's like, yes. And she's like, well, I am kind of hungry, And I'm like, well, getting some food is probably half our battle most of the time, but we're just hungry. But it's so sweet, and it just gets softer and softer and softer, and helps actually train the kids, give them some bedtime habits and routines that they can count on every time they listen and repeat the episodes, to get them ready and calm to go to bed. And it's just beautiful working with a storyteller named Stephanie Roth, who's just magical. So
that sounds amazing, especially in the world we have today,
yeah,
with all the screen time or the hecticness. Kids do need, well, not just kids. We can all benefit.
Yeah, I think adults are going to listen to. I mean, the stories are geared for young children, but I'm in there, recording the sessions going, like, I am so much more relaxed than when we started. This is like amazing. And I've been listening to the final, edits and everything. And I just like, don't listen to this if you're in your car and trying to operate, large machinery. But, and we thought about, should we make this a video or audio only? And we opted for audio only because we figured the kids don't need more screen time.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, Wendy. Oh, to my amazing guest, Wendy, thank you so much. And to our listeners, belongers, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember that you belong. This is Dia Irby with Here Where You Belong podcast, signing off. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Here Where You Belong. We hope today's episode has inspired you to embrace the beauty of belonging in your own life. Remember, no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. Join us again next time for more insightful conversations and heartwarming stories. Until then, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember that you belong.